say we just heard a lot of talk. You heard a lot of tautological and circuitous logic going on and a number of non sequiturs. Mainly, gender is different than sex. Okay, well, that doesn't magically make a trans-identified man a woman. We could agree, assuming
doesn't make them a man either.
We could agree, assuming arguendo, that gender is different than sex. It doesn't make a trans-identified man a woman. And the burden of proof,
gender or sex.
The burden of proof is on you to prove that a trans-identified man is a woman.
Hang on.
And you have provided none.
Hold on 1 second. Okay, hold on 1 second. Hold on.
It's called a tautology.
Let me just try to bring order. Okay, I appreciate your guys. I appreciate it. Okay, both Brenton and First Amender want to respond. Who would like to go first? Hey, everybody. Tonight we're debating whether or not trans women are women, and we are starting right now with Josh's opening statement. Thanks for being with us, Josh and Taylor. The floor is all yours.
Well, thanks for having me, James. Thanks to everyone for being here. To be a trans woman, a prerequisite of that is you must be a man. So women cannot be trans women. Only men can be trans women. So definitionally, you must be a man in order to be a trans woman. Ipso facto, they are not women. There is no transformative or magical power that comes with uttering an incantation, namely the incantation that your gender identity differs from your biological sex. Nothing magical happens when that occurs. You're simply making a statement. You are simply opining about how you feel. Anorexia is a thought disorder. Someone is not fat at 70 pounds. Schizophrenia is a thought disorder. The CIA is not chasing that person. Body dysmorphia is a thought disorder. Their face is not out of proportion. Gender dysphoria, like all the other ones I just named, is a thought disorder. That man is not a woman. These are all fallacious thoughts that flow from a mental health condition, and it does not make those delusions real. Those delusions do not manifest into something factual simply because the person is cogitating on them or thinking about them. Furthermore, articulating those fallacious thoughts does not imbue them with some magical power that makes them objectively true. I say all this to say that men with a mental illness do not magically become women because of that mental illness. That mental illness should be treated. We should be kind and compassionate to people that are struggling with thought disorders, whether it's body dysmorphia, schizophrenia, anorexia, or in this case, gender dysphoria. Another problem and a more nuanced issue are the medical guidelines and scientific literature, which state unequivocally that someone is a valid trans person, even if they don't have gender dysphoria, don't get surgery, don't take hormones, and even if they don't transition. All they have to do is articulate a gender identity that differs from their biological sex, and they are considered valid under the medical guidelines and also under most statutes in most states. That is, the law of the land and the science is self-ID. It is self-identification. It is a self-declaration. In other words, it's totally meaningless. This network of medical rules and guidelines are so nebulous, so amorphous, as to render the meaning of trans meaningless. Not only is the meaning of trans meaningless, but as a consequence and corollary of that, they definitely don't become women. So I would argue that not only are they not women, but you're really getting into sketchy territory to try to say that they're even trans, because what trans is so loosely defined and so amorphous as, in my opinion, to be meaningless. Again, it is simply a man that is mentally ill, and a man that is mentally ill does not become a woman. A man that hacks off his penis is just a man that hacked off his penis. A man with so-called gender dysphoria is just a man with gender dysphoria. At no point in any of these processes does any kind of transformative power take over and make that person become a woman. Again, they would be called women if they were women. They are not. They are trans identified men. We all know this. Everyone that's sentient and thinking and rational and logical knows this is the case, but people want to be kind. People want a virtue signal. We want to exercise some kind of compassion for people that are struggling with these mental illnesses and thought disorders. And so we think that if we just tell them, yes, you're a woman, that will make them feel better. But it doesn't make it true. And again, we wouldn't tell the schizophrenic person out of a desire to be kind and compassionate that, yes, the CIA is chasing you. We wouldn't tell the body dysmorphic person out of a sense of kindness and passionate, yes, your face is distorted. We wouldn't tell the anorexic person out of a sense of kindness and compassionate, yes, you are fat at 70 pounds. You should get liposuction and take those diet pills. We don't lie to these people. The only people we lie to that have thought disorders are people with gender dysphoria, and we only do it because of what's been going on in the political terrain and what's been going on in woke culture. So I would just like to sum it all up by saying we all know that a prerequisite to being a trans woman is you must be a man. We all know no magical power imbues in those people that are uttering this incantation that they believe they are a woman. And we all know that they are just men with a mental illness at the end of the day. And I'll pass it off to my teammate.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you for having me. Thank you to James. Thank you for everybody watching. Okay, I will be arguing against the claim that trans women are women. Firstly, I would like to draw attention to the claim itself. Asking if one thing is another thing seems to answer its own question. A woman is not a trans woman and a trans woman is not a woman, or else we would have no need for these different terms. Accurately defining terms is important work. The purpose of language is to be descriptive and to communicate. We as a society have an obligation to work together in order to have agreed upon definitions so we can communicate with one another. The definition of woman that I propose as most accurate and informative is adult human female. Adult meaning fully grown and developed as opposed to girl. Human being, the classification of species, and female being a person who undertook the pathway of female development as they developed in their mother's womb, specifically their gamete or sex cell production. None of these aspects of being a woman can be changed by any surgery, self-identification, or hormone intake. 1.7% of the population are born intersex, which encompasses different conditions pertaining to chromosomal, hormonal, or genital abnormalities. But when it comes to defining trans women, it gets trickier. I propose that there is no one definition that the trans community agrees upon for trans women. I'd like to go through a few of the common kind of conditions I've heard for meeting the term women or trans women. One argument could be that a trans woman is considered a woman simply by performing as a woman based on what society claims to be feminine or womanly. This then would boil womanhood down to simple societal norms that tend to change throughout culture and time. I would also posit that not all trans women identify with all or the same aspects of femininity, thus including some from the definition. Progressives tend to use transgenderism as a way to subvert social gender norms, though perhaps it would be more accurate to critique the gender norms themselves as a whole and concede that the norms, in fact, are not inclusive, as not all women like feminine activities, roles, colors, etc. I posit that those on the left who claim to be progressives are actually hurting their own cause when buying into trans ideology, as boiling a woman down to societal norms would seem to me to be the least progressive thing to do. Instead, why not claim that women can dress how they want, participate in jobs that they want, hobbies that they're drawn to, while still maintaining their womanhood? Simply performing as something does not make you something. I can be mistaken by somebody dressed as a doctor when in fact they are an actor playing a doctor. My confusion would not make them an actual physician. Some activists would claim that my biological account for woman is not pragmatic, in that everyday life we're not testing people's DNA for their biological sex, though this has no bearing on the truth of the matter that trans women are not in fact women. If self-ID is all it takes, then there is no need for hormone therapy, social transition, surgeries. All it would take to become a woman is a simple claim. The idea of self-ID for gender is unique to gender. There are no other situations in which you can claim something and just become it. There are always some sort of necessary or sufficient conditions that need to be met. For example, being a student or a Muslim requires something outside of just saying you are. There is a claim that one's internal perception creates gender, and that those who experience an incongruence with their assigned sex and gender. I do not believe that there is this idea of gender, that it is fully based on some sort of social construct, though some aspects of social norms associated with sex are arbitrary. Though if gender norms do exist, surely they can be subverted, and this has no bearing on one being a man or a woman. A person can be a feminine man, a person can be a masculine woman. Feminine and masculine would be the socially constructed part, not man and woman. The idea of trans women seems to rely on one's own perception of themselves as a woman instead of being their assigned sex. Internal perceptions can be incorrect. One can believe that they have been abducted by aliens when they are hallucinating, or that they are overweight when they are in fact underweight, as Josh had mentioned. Thus, we cannot rely on one's self-reported internal perception. And I would ask the question to trans women, what does it actually feel like to be a woman? Another argument that has been circulated around trans circle is that of the wrong brain argument. A female can have a male brain or vice versa, thus making one trans. This argument falls short of including all trans people, as not all trans people share brains similar to their perceived sex, and would also mean that we would have to include some people that do not identify as trans. One study shows that gay men tend to have brain structures more closely resembled to females, lesbians the same with men. Are those people men? Are those people women? I would also put forth that the brain studies are not sufficient enough for the wrong brain claim. Most have not been replicated. Brains are also plastic. They can change depending on many things. The amygdala is often cited in these studies, which is responsible for anxiety, sexual behavior. The amygdala can be affected by one's life experience, their culture. We often see it change in those who have PTSD. Cortical thickness is often cited as a difference in male, female, and trans brains, so this can be affected by age, exercise, environment. Many of these studies also find that the brains of trans people may be different, but not exactly the same as their perceived sex, gender. People who suffer from mental illness often have differences in brains compared to neurotypical individuals. Overall, the brain is plastic. It changes based on experience, exposures, and there's just simply not enough data to support the wrong brain claim. But most importantly, this definition of trans is exclusive of all trans women and does not explain the concept of like a non-binary person, say. There is no other mental health condition in which the treatment is to give in to someone's false perceptions. We don't confirm someone who is paranoid of their delusions. We don't perform surgery on those who have anorexia because they think they are overweight. This ideology has consequences. We have little long-term studies on hormone therapy. We are transitioning children, and we are maybe just confusing people who have different preferences from a typical man or woman. I agree that compassion is important, and we should be kind and tactful with people, but we should be truthful because ultimately the truth is kind. I put forth that the most efficient and inclusive definition of woman is adult human female. Every other attempt at a definition is not useful or not inclusive of all trans women. I stand unconvinced that trans women are women, and ultimately the burden of proof is on my opponent's side to provide evidence that trans women are the same thing as women. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that opening. We are going to kick it over to the yes side, Brenton and First Amender. If it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we want to welcome you to hit that subscribe button as we have many more debates coming up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, especially for our upcoming conference. It is February 15th and 16th. It's a weekend in Newark, New Jersey. If you were anywhere near Newark, New Jersey, you have to come to this conference. The link for the tickets is below. And we're going to kick it over to Brenton and First Amender. First Amender, the floor is all yours for your opening statement.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard my interlocutors. I'm actually surprised, at least like with Taylor, I actually heard some actual understanding of the academic research regarding at least the brain, as well as, I guess like my concern is that you consider that gender is not different from sex somehow. Well, I mean, gender, right, is typically going to be a social idea where you're talking about roles. You're talking about behaviors, identities, expectations of society associating typically with male or female. And yes, there are male and female typical behaviors which occur as early as very young ages. There are psychological impacts of that. It can be a social as well as a psychological construct. It can be shaped by cultural and individual identity. And so a person's gender identity, it causes them to be effectively possessing a sense of being male or female in their brain, which may or may not be incongruent with their sex. It's typical that it is the same as their sex. So when I hear the question, are trans women women or are trans men men, what I'm thinking is by gender. Yeah, like if I'm saying like, are trans men men, I'm thinking, are trans men by gender men? I would say, yes, that is the case. If you're referring to sex, you'd be correct. Trans men would not be men by sex, but that would be the same situation. So I guess like my question is like, you spent all this time appearing to be reading through neurological papers regarding like brain gender identities, but for whatever reason didn't seem to associate that gender is different from sex. I mean, ask yourself this. Is there out there, can I say the word, that is a womanly man? Is that a logical state? Can you think of something in your head and it actually makes sense to you? Okay, if you can, you're already separating sex from gender, right? Because if you can't separate the sex from the gender, you would be incapable of understanding a womanly man, because you would be like, well, those don't actually make any sense. But we know there are girly men, and we know there exist manly women. So what is that? What is that incongruence, if you will? Now, can that incongruence be so heavy to the point that they actually feel like that they are that of woman or that of man? Yeah, the answer is yes. We can exhibit that throughout many different societies, not just in the United States. So the problem is that if are trans men, yeah, in terms of gender, they are men. That's how that works, right? And like all this time, I guess like talking about the neurology is just... Anyway, that's all I got. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brenton. Let me see if you're muted. You should be unmuted.
Am I good to go?
We're ready for you. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Very happy to be back here. If you guys get a chance, in the description, you're going to find I'm about to launch a new Kickstarter for Durruti Shadow of the People, which is my biopic/war epic about the life and death of anarchist Buenaventura Durruti. We were just covered in Bleeding Cool News. I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter, and fun fact, I actually introduced the real-life Infinity Gauntlet to comics. Long story, go check that out on Bleeding Cool. All right, so the question we are debating, are trans women women, is one that's exploded onto the scene post Caitlyn Jenner and Laverne Cox of Orange is the New Black. Prior to this as a society, we were aware of the existence of trans folk, especially trans women, but mainly treated them as objects of pity, disgust, and outright hostility. Humans, unfortunately, have a very strong instinct towards conformity, and as such, beyond the simple cruelty, bullying, and at best, casual indifference that society treats we cis people with, there is an extra layer of, quite frankly, illogical and completely unreasonable rage at the mere existence of someone who doesn't conform to something that we view as so central to humanity, gender. And not just any gender, specifically the modern Western concept of gender, especially in how it relates to the right wing's favorite incoherent concept, that of the nuclear family. It's also ahistorical. Now, definitions are tricky, especially when it comes to politically charged rhetoric, and often emotionally charged discussions like this, people just wind up talking past each other. So, to put the matter to rest, here is Nature Journal, the single most respected scientific publication in the entire Western world, stating in no uncertain terms, quote, "Sex is a classification based on internal and external bodily characteristics, and gender is a social construct related to biological differences, but also rooted in culture, societal norms, and individual behavior." And then, of course, it goes on to say, whatever the cause, organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics advise physicians to treat people according to their preferred gender, regardless of appearance or genetics. The research and medical community now see sex as more complex than male and female, and gender as a spectrum that includes transgender people and those who identify as neither male nor female. Because, of course, when you're treating somebody, you're not going to start arguing with them about what their gender is. You're trying to actually help whatever, fix my damn arm. So to be clear, objectively, scientifically, as true as 2 + 2 = 4, sex and gender are different things, and woman is a term relating to gender and not sex. Thus, scientifically, trans women are objectively real women and should be treated as such. Now, you may want to run to the dictionary and declare loudly that the dictionary definition of a woman is X, Y, or Z. I'm going to stop you right there. Dictionaries have no authority whatsoever over the meaning of words. Rather, a dictionary is a curated list created by an editorial committee who simply put out the dictionary. Dictionaries are catalogs over its publisher's subjective opinion of how people are using language. Words are common property. The only thing that gives a word meaning is how it's used, and appeal to dictionary is quite literally a fallacy. Now, so you can't really use adult human female or large gamete producers for two reasons. The first one being that this is a begging the question fallacy. You have to assume that woman is, that the definition of woman is the second part of that definition that you put forward. And then further on from that, the argument relies on a conflation of terms. You are defining gender in terms of sex. So that's just going, nuh-uh. No. Let's not pay attention to any of these scientists. Let's not listen to anybody who's actually an expert in this field. No. I think because the dictionary says this, that the definition of woman is biological human female. Shut the... Anyway, getting a little hot there. But so what is a woman? As we have to do this. Now, the answer might seem simple, but this is actually a question that has been asked since the time of the ancient Greeks and probably a great deal before. Plato quite famously put forth what seems to be a reasonable definition of her eternal partner, a man, stating, man is a bipedal, two-legged, featherless animal, which received a great deal of applause until the far superior philosopher Diogenes strolled into the Lyceum, holding aloft a plucked chicken, all while shouting, "Here is Plato's man." Plato, having been completely owned by a master troll, took the L and amended his definition to include broad fingernails. You will notice that this definition also includes gorillas and many other species of great ape. The point is, gender is a much more confusing and philosophically fraught concept than it initially appears to be. Every human society in recorded history has had a different answer to this question. During the medieval period, women were seen as being the sexually aggressive gender, and men were widely believed to be more chaste and demure of the sexes. Blue was originally a feminine color due to its passive feel and the fact that it was the color of Mary's robes, while the true color of the modern masculine warrior is pink because of its association with red. This characterization lasted until advertising firms in the 1930s decided to market their products as the opposite, creating the pink to blue dynamic that we all have today. Yeah, that's right. Gendered colors are the ghosts of cultural inertia invented explicitly as a way to sell clothing, toys, and razors to Americans pre-World War II. The point is, the women of all these societies, including our own less than a century ago, behaved in ways that we would consider both masculine and feminine today. I love to bring it up, but high-heeled shoes were actually invented by Mongolian cavalry to make it easier to shoot arrows from horseback. So if you're watching Game of Thrones, Khal Drogo himself should have been walking around in a pair of pumps. That would have made the show actually a little bit more interesting. Anyway, so we can't get the answer from history. Let's go to biology, but yet again, we run into a problem. If we define a woman by her biological role, that necessarily excludes women who are infertile. And then there's the added complication that all life, biologically speaking, begins as female. Both the body and the mind are essentially female until hormones act on them. Ever wonder why men have nipples? Yeah, that's why. Hate to say it, guys, but scientifically speaking, we are all essentially modified females. Mother Nature is a mad scientist who does all sorts of weird shit all the damn time, confounding we humans who naturally want to straighten a wobbly world. But honestly, the world is not straight. Nothing fits into our human boundaries. We simply experience the world and try to understand it within the confines of our culture and level of intelligence and education. All right, so what we're really dealing with when we talk about gender is an ideal, a construction of the human mind. And as all ideals, by definition, only exist in the mind, what is and is not a man is a decision made by a person and their community, is the work of an entire culture at a given point in time. So when my interlocutor brings up doctors, the interesting thing about that is take somebody who is perfectly qualified to be a doctor. They've gone to medical school, but they don't have a doctorate, maybe, by the end of that. And on top of that, they have not been given the authority to practice medicine via getting their medical license. What is the criteria for someone to be a doctor? Well, That's whatever a particular society has decided is the criteria for them to be a doctor. And you just got to look at all the snake oil salesmen back, like not even 100 years ago, to see again who fits into what social role is always 100% of the time subjective. The very fact that we can talk about and ask the question, are women women, are trans women women, is about as dumb as like asking ourselves the question of, what the hell was it? If it was actually objective, and if the line between sex and gender and all of this were not demarcated, what we would see right here is that we would see the demarcation. It would be as silly as saying that a human has two heads. Obviously, humans have one head, and then, occasionally you get the issue with like conjoined twins. But again, the very fact that we can disagree about this proves the position that trans women are women. When people say trans women are women, usually what they mean is within society, trans women, they believe them to be women, and thus they should be treated as women, and they are asking the rest of the society to do that right now. So, once again, sex and gender, two different things. You cannot argue with that. Gender is informed by sex, but is not defined by sex. They are not the same term, even though the dictionary definition, you have to assume that it's right when you begin before the end. Again, ad hominem logical fallacy. So I've gone on entirely too long, but right here, this is so key because so much of this discussion is based on a lack of information, insufficient education, and then finally on that, just the fact that people freak the hell out about gender for what is effectively no reason. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that opening as well. We're going to jump into the open conversation. I want to let you know, folks, we will have a wrap-up strictly at 10 p.m. Eastern. So if you happen to have questions, submit them early for the Q&A. You can do that either by tagging me in the live chat with @ModernDayDebate, or you can use a super chat. That will push your question to the top of the list. We're going to jump into the open dialogue. Thank you very much to all of our guests for your openings. The floor is all yours for open discussion.
Awesome. I just wanted to say we just heard a lot of talk. Our last speaker was very loquacious, and you heard a lot of tautological and circuitous logic going on and a number of non sequiturs. Mainly, gender is different than sex. Okay, well, that doesn't magically make a trans-identified man a woman. We could agree, assuming
arguendo doesn't make them a man either.
We could agree, assuming arguendo, that gender is different than sex. It doesn't make a trans-identified man a woman. And the burden of proof,
gender or sex.
The burden of proof is on you to prove that a trans-identified man is a woman.
Hang on.
And you have provided none.
Hold on 1 second. Okay, hold on 1 second. Hold on.
It's called a
Let
tautology.
me just try to bring order. Okay, I appreciate your guys. I appreciate it. Okay, both Brenton and First Amender want to respond. Who would like to go first? I suppose in the open dialogues we had First Amender go first, so Brenton will give you a chance to go first this time, and then First Amender if you want to respond. And then I just want to be sure that we don't go too deep down the rabbit hole because it sounds like there's a lot of thoughts on this. But go ahead. I will unmute you guys, and the floor is yours, Brenton.
All right. So, this actually goes back to a lot of what I was hearing from Josh. There's a ton of unsupported assertions. If you want to come at the beginning and you say a man can never be a woman because that man is a man, again, that is a circular argument that is begging the question. It is exactly the same problem that we have with biological human female as the definition. You have to assume that the answer is correct in the premise, thus it is inherently circular and 100% illogical. Now, if you want to talk about, again, like when we're making the distinction between sex and gender, this is a good way to explain it. And I'm going to be a little nicer here because I will say that, we've all been raised to believe lies, and that is one of the biggest ones. So the way to understand the difference between sex and gender: sex is what you are. You are classified by internal and external bodily characteristics. Now, gender is the therefore you should that is tied on to the end of sex. I have the body that I do, therefore I should perform very specific tasks. I should not perform other tasks. And if I ever step out of line in this, the overall predisposition of most of society is to enforce gender and do something to hurt me if I do something that is not normally.
I want to kick it. I want it just to be sure that because we had a small bit from Josh, and I know that First Amender, you're dying to get it out, but I also just want to give Josh a chance because Josh really hasn't gotten a chance to talk much. He got a little bit at that very start of the open dialogue, and then I want to give him a little bit more before we go to First Amender. I promise, First Amender, you'll be next. Josh, did you have any thoughts? It looked like you had something to say. I clicked.
Yes, so he just conceded that they're still biologically a man. They're simply confused about their gender or believe that they're a different gender, but biologically and anatomically, they're still a man. He's provided absolutely no proof that they're a woman because he can't, because it doesn't happen. He's separating gender from sex, and that's fine, but sex trumps gender, and even if you have a gender identity that you think differs from your biological sex, that person is still a man, and he can provide no proof that they stop being a man, even if they're gender confused. So I want the proof.
And First Amender, I want to give you a chance to respond because it looked like you had something to say, and then eventually we got to get Taylor here. But go ahead, First Amender.
Yeah, by sex you would be correct, but not by gender. Do you understand that?
Great. Which one trumps which? Which one trumps which?
There's no one trumping
Okay,
another.
Then stop calling men women. Language matters. Stop calling men women.
That gender is different from
Alright,
sex.
let's-
Let me ask you.
Stop
this.
calling men.
I do want to
Stop
hold on,
calling
but hold
men
on. I do
women.
want to let's give
this.
Taylor a chance. Let's give Taylor a chance. We heard your point, First Amender. First time during the open dialogue that we heard from Taylor. Go ahead, Taylor.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to a few things, and I think maybe we could just pause and get. I am curious on my opposing sides. Both of their just definitions, so I just know what we're working with. Truly curious. What is gender? Can you guys just give me a very quick definition of what gender is, just so I know what I'm working with here?
Yeah, so I gave you one. Sex is what you are based upon internal and external bodily characteristics. It is a taxonomic classification. What gender is people take the taxonomic category and they say, well, your body is a certain way and I think you look like this. Therefore, you should, for instance, not be a man and have earrings.
Wait.
Therefore, you should take certain jobs. Therefore, you should do one of a number of different behaviors and avoid other behaviors.
I hear that. Do you think that definition is more closely aligned with gender stereotypes or sex stereotypes or something like that instead of a gender identity? That's how you're identifying as what you should do based on your body. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, no, you're misunderstanding. It doesn't have anything at all to do with stereotypes. Those are just ways that we can make a quick explanation. What is and is not a woman is determined by an entire culture at a given time and place. There is altering characteristics that are associated with it. This is why it was actually kind of interesting that you said performance, because a lot of the academic philosophy on this is that gender itself is performative, as in I am performing right now. I'm performing masculinity. You are performing femininity. Now, the criteria changes from place to place. But again, what we have here again are two ideals that exist in the mind, and they're being expressed as one of two social roles. There doesn't even have to be just men and women. There could be, when they asked Joe Biden, how many genders are there? There's effectively an infinite number. It's just what we as society have decided is most useful in this time and place. So we have the two genders right now because we think it's useful. We run into some edge cases with, you brought up people, by the way, 1.7 is a massive number. You brought up people with different conditions of birth where they can't be accurately classified as men or women. This is when the concept of gender, as we understand it now, begins to break down. It stops serving us. So
just to be sure we have equal amount of words approximately from each guest. Any thoughts on that, Taylor?
Yes.
And then we got to go back to Josh.
Okay, sure. Just let me that was just so much. So I guess I just want to ask you if you feel like that definition of gender, and let's just say specifically woman, so we're not getting too like nebulous. If that definition of woman, which is like the expectation or how you're, I'm still a little unclear. It just feels so nebulous to me. But I think I understand what you're trying to say. But do you feel like that definition of woman, when it comes to people that are trans, is inclusive of all women? What would you say if someone wants to be a woman, but they want to prevent very masculine? Or what if a biological female wants to be masculine? Like, do you feel like your definition is inclusive of all trans women?
So no definition at all for anything is ever.
You feel like it's mainly statistically
Yes.
like majority.
So what I would say, my definition is that woman is whatever a given culture believes a woman to be at a given time. There are aspects of that and ideals that get attached to that, and this is how we actually use gender. So I'm not actually saying like, oh, women should wear high-heeled shoes and not men. I'm not saying that like you must perform femininity in a way that I personally consider to be feminine, because it doesn't matter about me. You know, it matters, one, do you identify as embodying that particular subjective social role? And two, is this echoed back to you by your community? Are you treated as a woman? That is what makes someone a woman, a man, or a woman. People often will play with this issue, like with regard to definition.
I'll give you a chance to wrap up. I didn't mean to. I just want to be sure we kick it back over. Josh has been
yeah, no,
he's
well,
been
also,
languishing.
First Amender hasn't gotten to speak either, so
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then we'll hand it over to First Amender. Would that make you happy, Brenton?
It definitely would. Anyway, I'll just to wrap this up like very, very quickly. People oftentimes think that a definition is something that is perfect, when in fact it is a concept. It is a subjective symbol of a wiggly world, essentially. So you can't even come up with a definition of like a chair that excludes all versions of a chair and everything we would call a chair and keeps all things that we would call a chair, essentially in that concept. This is like literally physically impossible because of like Russell's paradox. You can't make a set that contains all sets without like just having a massive problem. And the problem is, again, these concepts aren't real.
Right. Let's go to First Amender, really pithy. And then we have to go to Josh. He's languishing. He's dying to get in here for more. Go ahead. First Amender, you got 27 seconds. That's it.
Gender is just referring to the roles, the behaviors, identities, and expectations society associates with being male or female. It's a social or psychological construct which is shaped by cultural or individual identity, which results in a person's deeply held sense of being male, female, or something else, which may or may not align with their assigned sex at birth. I kind of get what you're saying, where there's like a level of, I guess, stereotyping which can occur. However, there are behaviors that are generally male or female. And I mean, I can go over those, but I mean, I think like, can we at least acknowledge that gender is different from sex? Like this isn't hard, right? Like
I can't, because I'm still unclear of what gender is. Like I am aware of the idea of like I am aware that there are kind of expectations or stereotypes associated with sex, but the idea of gender is so still unclear. Like women and man was
so does the term man, does a manly woman, is that
I'm glad
possible?
I think that a manly woman is just like an incorrect use of the term manly. I think that in other ways that we
so
use
it makes
now
no sense to you. You can't imagine a manly woman.
Just like I can say the only example I can use is like kind of insulting, but like just when it was kind of a thing when people would say like, oh, you're gay, but they didn't
if I saw like a woman that's
there's
like
ways to
benching
use
3
words
plates
incorrectly, and it's almost, I feel like that is just, this is like not how we use the term. It's almost an insulting. It's actually playing off of like, oh, you're a manly woman because you're not doing what like society says.
What I'm trying to say is not whether or not it's insulting. I'm trying to say, I guess it could be perceived as insulting, but what I'm asking here is, can you imagine it?
Sure, I can imagine a lot of things where the words are used incorrectly. Like I can, because
so like, do you think like if I looked at a woman that's like benching 3 plates,
is that woman?
I could come up with the idea that man, that is a manly woman.
Yes, but is she a man? Is she a man because of
Well, it
because of
depends.
her
It
manliness?
depends.
It
But
depends.
On
that's
what,
kind of
though?
it
There's
depends on their
no.
internal identity.
But
You're
what if
being
they're
disingenuous.
So
You know
I
that's
wanna-
not true.
Oh, I actually want to hear this intelligent person talk. But so I wanted to go back. So here's the thing, right? If you can acknowledge that the concept of a manly woman exists, you're acknowledging the difference between sex and gender, because
I'm
there's an
acknowledging-
incongruence between
I'm
their sex
acknowledging-
assigned at birth and then something that is societally happening, right?
Yes, I am
it's not
acknowledging-
controversial that men tend to be stronger than women, right?
Yes, I agree.
Okay,
100%.
all right.
And I
And is it
agree that
possible
people
for a
can-
woman to lift 3 plates?
I don't know, maybe, but
Can most
yeah.
men lift 3 plates?
Okay, so you're just dragging this out because the point is that people can be masculine and people can be feminine, and that is the conflation here. Is that you're saying that because somebody is more feminine that they are in fact a woman, which I
I'm
think
saying
is
they could be
just
so
incorrect.
much so that their gender identity is that. Yes.
But what if they are so feminine as much as whatever, and they internally don't believe so? Like, I'm asking you for your
Hey, more
opinion.
power to you. More power to you. That's gender expression. That's how it
The
works.
burden of proof is on you guys. The
I
prompts are
just
women,
gave it to
women.
you.
But you're saying trans women are women. Yes, you're saying these two
Yeah.
are the same thing. So you have
No.
yet-
No, you're
yes.
conflating sex and
It-
gender.
Oh,
I'm just
man.
talking about gender.
What part of that is
Right?
sex?
Obviously,
Trans
their
women
sex
are
never
women.
changes.
Sex is what you
The
look
sex
like.
never changes.
Yes, but I'm even asking you guys for a consistent definition of woman. I'm not getting that. That includes.
What? Yeah,
all
I can
this-
agree.
there's
Adult
never been a
human female,
consistent
just like
definition of
you.
woman
That's not any
once
different,
in
right? I can also acknowledge
you would
that
agree
sex
it's
is different
adult
from
human
gender.
female.
Sure, I can
as a
agree with
woman.
that. That's
So
completely
trans
fine.
women are adult human females.
What? Except there's if you're referring to gender, that's the problem. If you're
And again,
referring to gender,
dictionary cannot and should not ever be used as a authority on the meaning of words. Dictionaries.
Why are you fighting on? Why did you even do this debate if words don't matter? Why does it matter if trans
Words,
women are
no,
women?
words matter. It's just that dictionaries do not control the definition of a
Who cares
word.
about the dictionary? That's what I want to use it as.
I mean,
That's
you
what
just, yeah, but no, you're saying that it's adult human female. You are essentially saying, again, as I said
a
earlier,
woman is, yes.
so that is literally illogical. It does not work. It is a circular argument. You have to assume that the woman.
What's circular if
is an
female
adult
and women
human
are
female.
different as per your own claim? Why is it
Well,
circular?
Because, okay, people get confused about this oftentimes because there is both a personal component to gender and a social component to gender. And that both of these are tied to biology. So again, sex, male and female, are scientific biological concepts in taxonomy. They're being described by people because we find this to be useful. People think, and they used to think, that whatever your sex was, that 100% made you a man or 100% made you a woman. The problem is that sex is never 100%. There is no 100% male or 100% female. I made the point, with the fact
unless
that
you're
men
The
have-
Rock, that guy's just 100% male. I'm just gonna be
Okay,
honest with you.
fair
That guy.
enough.
I mean,
It's you-
that guy doesn't have a single bit of female in that guy's body. I'm sorry. All right,
I just
sorry.
don't think you guys have provided a definition that is like there's no necessary or sufficient conditions to be a woman. Like even with your doctor trying to go against my doctor example, you're saying like, oh, he has all the whatever,
Yeah.
knowledge of being a doctor. You're naming conditions. He has the knowledge or whatever. You're not
No,
giving
I
in terms
made
of the gender.
associate with the job doctor. Again, doctor means something very different.
How
It usually-
does wait, okay. So a gender is based on someone's internal perception. Like that's part of it. Would you say that has to be
It
part
is
of it? No
in-
matter
yes.
how
on
they're
the body.
okay.
Yes.
So do people that have like neurological conditions that can't have self-perceptions, are they nothing? Do they not have a gender?
What do you mean?
No, they do
can't-
have a gender. You have a gender right now, Taylor.
I have a gender even if I don't want to or something.
No,
'cause it's
no. You wait. You're saying you don't want to be a female?
If I had no internal perception, if I was like, I don't know what I am,
You don't feel
I
female?
have a gender. I don't know what that
I
means.
feel
Can
male.
Can you tell me what it means to feel male?
For me to feel male, I don't know.
Sure.
I like lifting stuff. I feel a
I
little
like
more
lifting
aggressive. I get a little loud sometimes, and I'm obnoxious. I don't know.
I
Those
get
are
loud.
some
I'm
things.
obnoxious.
Don't worry.
Arbitrary.
Compared to me, you're doing great.
These things are arbitrary that you're naming, though. I know
Yes,
you're joking,
Yeah,
no,
but that's why I'm
Gender
referring
is
to the
arbitrary.
roles, the behaviors, the identities, the expectations of society
and you feel like
that
it's
are typically
unimportant.
associated with male or female. If you're able to understand those, and sometimes they're not congruent with the sex, that's gender.
If I gave you let me just see how you feel about this. Do you think that maybe it's more progressive to say that someone can be a man and maintain what it is a man, they're a man, they're a male, they're a man, whatever the word, and be as feminine as they want to be? They want to wear dresses, they want to wear heels, they want to wear pink. Is it maybe more progressive to say that that person is still a man and it has no bearing on their gender?
Biologically, they're a man, but if they identify as a female or a woman, then they are a woman by gender. But the sex never changes. It never changes. That's how that works.
Yeah, okay, so a man then. Forget
Right,
the
it's a man with a female
By
gender
sex, can you
identity.
acknowledge
It's a
the difference
man with
between
a
sex and
female
gender?
gender
Why is
identity.
this so
So it's
I
odd?
haven't been
meaningless.
given
Okay.
a sufficient definition for gender. So
Correct.
Wait, yes, I did. I'm going to repeat
It's
it
a
one more time.
man with a female
Refers to
gender
the roles
identity.
or behaviors,
Again, that's
identities,
just
and
not-
expectations of society, associates with being male or female. It's a social or psychological construct
I
shaped by
think your-
cultural and individual identity, which results in
your
a person's deeply
definition-
held sense of being male or female or something else. That's
Your
what it
definition-
is.
Your definition excludes some trans women.
No,
Do you
it
understand?
doesn't.
Some,
All
yes, it
definitions-
does.
No, it
Of course
doesn't.
it does. Societal
Something.
expectations. If some trans women choose to present masculine, which does exist, there are trans women in the community that want to say, I don't owe you femininity. That is a thing, that say that they want to remain as masculine or whatever the word you want to use, and they still want to be referred to as a woman. Some even want to be referred to as a female.
Gives a shit.
That would adhere with their
How is
person's
that adhering to
deeply held
social
sense of being male or female, which would in fact coincide with my definition. That is
Could we
within my
uphold-
definition.
Should we uphold all of people's deeply held perceptions or whatever the definition says? Should we
Yeah,
uphold
kinda.
everybody?
Yeah.
We should, even
Sure.
if they're incorrect or potentially harmful. We should uphold all of their perceptions.
I mean, in this situation, it's not harmful. It's actually
no,
quite
in
helpful.
any situation, is it helpful? Are
Yeah.
you sure?
You don't
Yeah.
have
I
to.
do want to. Well,
Josh,
give
yeah, sorry.
Josh,
Go ahead.
Josh a chance because we haven't heard from Josh. Do you have? It sounds like you might have thoughts. Jump in.
Yeah, so we've heard, I think we can just sum everything up for the last 15 minutes this way. There are people fall in two camps, and there's probably two different definitions of women. You have heard one definition articulated by my opponents that is completely and utterly meaningless. And then you have people that live in reality that are articulating a different definition that actually means something. And so we can just agree to disagree. We'll agree that me and Taylor hold a different definition of what it means to be a woman. And I posit our definition is correct. Now, I'll just quote one of my opponents. He said, gender is, quote, an ideal, a construction in the mind. I would say that's meaningless. And they have already conceded that the sex never changes. What they are saying is that the person has, quote, a gender identity that is an ideal, a construction in the mind that is female. Okay, so we can all agree we are talking about a man with an ideal, a construction in the mind that he has a female gender identity. So
Yeah, this is
we have
assuming sex
just
is the
proven
same
that
as
it is
gender.
a man. We have just proven it is a man that thinks he has a female gender identity. That does not make that man a woman. And me and Taylor's definition of a woman clearly would not include that person. Your definition of a woman is so loose and nebulous that it would. And I would posit that you guys are fucking idiots, and you know that.
Okay, but then again,
I love this. By the way, just FYI, prior to this whole thing even starting, Josh was just like, I want to make this to be like an intellectual discussion. where
But
we
you're
could just
fucking, you're
discuss
stupid. You're an
intellectually,
idiot.
now
And you're
just
being
calling people
disingenuous.
idiots. Anyway,
And you're being
so Josh, I
duplicitous.
just
And you
wanna
called me
point
stupid
out, right,
earlier.
going back
And
to
you
it,
said I
right?
wasn't
I really
intelligent.
want to go back to
No,
it
you
here,
said I
right?
wasn't intelligent. You called
Is
me
sex
stupid
different
earlier.
from
So you
gender?
started this
Is
pugilistic
sex
thing.
different from gender?
I'm not gonna
So
say
you
whether
started
sex
the
different
argument.
from
All
gender?
You
right,
insulted
we
me
got
with
Josh,
ad hominem
answer it.
attacks.
All right,
Don't
hold on
say
one
you
second.
want
We
to
ad
okay,
hominems
we
are not.
You're an
an insult.
idiot.
My God.
Nobody
we
cares
got it.
about your
We
opinion.
know First Amender started it, but let's jump to the next point. What was the I think Taylor, did you have something you were wanting to say?
I did have something I wanted to address, but
Brenton,
Sure,
go
go
ahead.
He's
ahead.
talked enough. Why don't you let Taylor talk?
this-
He's
I get
talked
it is
enough.
true,
Let
Brenton.
Taylor
I
say
do
something.
I'll
I
be
do need
quick
you to
here,
be
James. I'm
hold on
sorry.
one sec.
Go
I
on.
do
You
need
said
you to
that
be
last time and
really
you weren't quick.
I do need you to be really pithy, Brenton, because I do want to kick it back to Taylor, because it is true that you, like me, have a lot to say. But go ahead, Brenton, for a pithy rejoinder.
All right. So what was asked earlier was essentially like why is our definition incorrect because it is nebulous and it is open to change. The fact of the matter is that if you define anything in a hard and fast term at any point, you are always wrong, always a little wrong. Nothing is perfect. I am not perfectly a man. You are not perfectly a woman. We have different characteristics. And in fact, like when you talked about brains, there is no 100% male brain, because every male brain from one individual to another is different. They are just similar. Now, why
This
should
might be a good time to jump over to Taylor.
Yeah, why should we use this? It's because it has more utility in today's day and age when we talk about gender and gender roles.
Okay,
Okay, Taylor.
That is a great point. I want to talk about utility because I actually completely disagree that your definition has more utility. I think at one point somebody said, like, this is how we understand gender now, this is how people understand it. And I would say that, like, I don't want to, like, this is a made up number, but like 90% of this country does not define gender in the way you define gender. So can you explain how that's more utilitarian if, like, most people wouldn't know what you're speaking about? If you went to anywhere that's not some like liberal city and you said woman in the way you're saying it, that they wouldn't understand what you're speaking of and you couldn't speak about it. Is that very utilitarian? The only reason I bring up the brain structures and all these things is because this is the attempts I've heard at defining woman in the way that you guys want to try to define it, which is self-ID or all these different kind of grabbing at straws. I'm just claiming that none of those are sufficient in encompassing all of the people that want to identify as trans. And the definition that I posited, it does encompass all people that are adult human females, even if there are some statistically, you know, small disorders like being infertile or something like that. That is something that went wrong. That doesn't mean that makes them less of a woman. If a dog typically has 4 legs and they lose a leg, it doesn't make them not a dog. Like, we know that. That's intuition. We can understand that. But I agree that definitions should have utility. So I would like to understand why you feel like yours has more than mine.
Okay, so mine has more utility than yours because I have 2 words in particular that are different. So if I'm talking about sex, and I want to make sure somebody understands that I'm talking about internal and external bodily characteristics, then I use male and female. If I'm talking about gender, I will say man and woman.
And if most of the country would see no difference in that, if most of the country or probably the world would see no difference in those things, that's still the most.
I mean, we're capable of learning. The actual philosophical and scientific knowledge within a society is.
So we're talking about utility, so it matters, right? I mean, if we're going to communicate,
I mean, if I had to like describe the word asymptotic, right? I would imagine there's an X amount of people that don't know what the word asymptotic means. That doesn't mean or revoke the utility behind the word. Right. Yeah. This is a ridiculous argument.
But
like,
it's not very.
We're able to understand sex is different from gender, right? And if we're saying our trans women,
that's not very utilitarian.
What's wrong with you, Josh? Like, I was like trying to say something.
You interrupt me all the time, so I'm just reciprocating.
All right, Josh.
But it's not very utilitarian if it doesn't include all of the people you're trying to define. Like, I don't. That's my main point.
All of everything that you're trying to define, no matter what it is, sugar.
Lot. I would say a lot of the people you're trying to define, it doesn't include.
Okay. Well, what we can do is we can see about that, and maybe the definition that I am putting forth is not as good of a definition as I think it is. But to tell you the truth, it's actually a lot better and a lot more expansive. It lets.
Why is it more?
Yeah, we know that.
Definition. Why is it more?
Because mine is tied specifically to social social time and place, to constructs of a
even
society.
When you admitted that those things change all the time, your definition is still.
Yes. Everything changes all the time. Change is the only universal constant. Like, I'm sorry. Like, are you going to take issue with freaking thermodynamics? Like, I know that it feels like we should have a world where there are definitive truths and falsehoods with regard to everything. That would be very nice, but that is not how the world works. The world is weird. Biology and science, they're still arguably in their infancy. And we've made these massive leaps. And as we make massive leaps and learn more about the world, we change our society to be more successful. I think that it would be much better if we allowed trans women to be considered women, because I think that's one, more correct, and two, I think it's going to be more useful in the long run. The argument about people learning something and something changing as a result of that learning, that is not a point against a concept.
So you think it's useful to have trans-identified men identifying their way into women's spaces and into womanhood?
Okay.
What is that word salad of it? Trans-identified
man. It's a trans-identified man.
So a trans-identified man. Well, no, that a trans man.
Are you obtuse?
would be like you're actually being like
trans-identified
just to be sure we hear. Hold on, just to be sure that there's not
trans-identified
much interrupting.
Okay, so you're referring to a trans woman, right?
A trans-identified man, which is a man that says, because it's a man that's trans-identified, and you think they should be able to just self-ID into womanhood.
Why is it so hard to say it?
Language matters, words matter, truth matters, and reality matters.
He can't even engage with the most basic of definitions.
You can't engage because you're living in a delusion, and it's science fiction.
I'm not living in a delusion.
You need to live in reality.
Any science textbook, it's going to tell you
You
sex
are
is
living
different
in
from
a
gender. I'm
delusion.
sorry.
Difference between that and a insult. An ad hominem is saying you're
Taylor,
wrong.
what are your thoughts on Brenton's ideology?
Did you say me? Sorry.
Yes. What are your thoughts on Brent's ideology?
No, Brenton is that's my full name.
Now you want to go by Brenton. Okay. Taylor, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm just going to be repetitive here because I just think self-ID, I mean, it seems like there's two parts of the definition that we have for, let's just stick to the prompt, because the thing that you guys are saying is true is trans women are women. That's just simply the prompt. So you're saying that is synonymous. Trans woman is a woman. And you're saying that the way that they identify into womanhood is by identifying into it.
Okay, think of it like this. Two subcategories. You have the category woman. Then you have the category cis woman. Then you have the category trans woman.
But that's not the argument. It's not a type of woman, it is woman.
Yeah, no, it is, because it's referring to gender. You're saying that gender is not different from sex. You're saying it's the same thing, but I'm showing to you plainly that that they are different. It's very easy to figure that out when you realize that, like, for example, I have an internal sense of being man. You have an internal sense of being woman. What if that's different?
But what if it isn't? What do you understand? Like, that's so arbitrary.
That's not arbitrary. That's an understanding of gender.
It is arbitrary when you're defining terms.
It's not arbitrary. It's referring to gender.
Can you name me any other term?
Is anyone else here a parent?
Yes.
Do you have any kids?
Yes, but I'm not sure.
I don't know
when
any
did
kids.
Kids start identifying as a particular gender?
They don't. I mean, it's absurd. They don't identify as anything. They just are.
How young are they?
I don't want to.
There are kids that identify as transgender.
I mean, okay. My point being, so I'm a parent. I have a son. I expected my son to start identifying it by one gender or another, when he was like 5 or 6. But actually, it was sort of between the ages of 2 and 3, if I'm remembering right. My son already had the internal experience of being a man, and it was very obvious that he was, both because of how he talked about it and how he worked. And most people are like that. Some people have an internal experience of being a woman and identifying with a woman, and this is probably biological in nature. It seems like we are predisposed towards one category or the other based on our own kind of individual makeup. And again, it seems like there are some issues with hormonal roots and different scientific things that can happen within the complications of the human body and mind that move someone in one direction or another. We can't choose our gender unless we are agender, or what was it, NB, non-binary. There are people that can, and then there are people who are non-binary who just cannot identify themselves with either. They are minorities. There's not as many of them as us, but what they are and how they act is exactly as valid as anyone else. So
Can
you know,
you, before it gets too much, can you give me some examples of how your son or anybody is showing you their gender? Can you give me like a hard example of that? That would make them have a gender then. You're
Well, that's
saying your
easy.
son can have a gender, but
Boys tend to play with other boys and girls tend to play with other girls, but that's not always the case. There's also the fact that the type of play is physically different among boys and girls. Among boys, they often desire, usually it's the aspect of what's called rough and tumble play. Whereas among girls, it tends to be more nurturing, not rough and tumble play or physical action, but more towards care. Now, I understand that that's a stereotype, but that's how boys and girls play. And that's not just how boys and girls play. That is also how several different primates also behave. This was tested on rhesus macaques, where they would try it on baby macaques that don't even know what a truck is. And they would have to show them the difference between, or rather they would just have in a cage 2 toys. One of them was a doll. The other one was a truck. The boys overwhelmingly picked the truck and the girls overwhelmingly picked the doll.
okay, so Brenton, if your son picked the doll, would you have ascribed him to a girl gender?
no, because well, first off, I wanted to make sure, like, because I value individuality and I value nonconformity. My wife and I, we did not want our son to suddenly be getting like deluged with cultural programming. So what we did essentially was we didn't tell anyone the sex of our son. We didn't even know it up until the time that he was born. This forced our relatives to not come in with a bunch of pink toys or a bunch of blue toys, just come in with toys. And the way that my son behaves, it is very, very clear that he identifies with being a man. He is also biologically male. So this is how it works for, 99.5% of us. There are unfortunately some edge cases where the internal experience does not match the external body. And this drives people crazy for some reason.
I don't think it drives people crazy. I actually don't think the problem is that people care if like boys play with dolls. I think the problem is that when boys plays with dolls, you guys ascribe to them to being a girl. Like, I think that's the whole problem.
Taylor, it's not that simple, right? Obviously, like it can be as like, I know I gave a single example, right? But there's also the fact boys tend to play with other boys, girls tend to, it's a multitude of factors that result where you may start to think, okay, their gender identity may actually be atypical, right? And if they actually exhibit that, okay, I would personally, I'd take them to a psychologist, determine whether or not that they have gender dysphoria, determine if there's any kind of like a gender incongruence that results in suicidal ideation. If there is, then yeah, they need to be on hormone blockers, right? Because I want my kid to be okay, right? A majority of these things, believe it or not, it's actually just social, right? And they actually grow out of it. In which case it's just basically social affirmation from then on. That's basically what the medical consensus is sitting at, which by the way is already a very conservative position.
James, can I jump in since this is?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm hearing and what Taylor's probably hearing and most normal people out there is that there are men or boys who sometimes have feminine characteristics, have feminine interests, have traditionally female interests, express themselves in traditionally female ways. At no point in time do those boys or men ever become women. Now you can change the definition or try to define what a woman is. What you can do is you can try to change the definition of what a woman is so that let me talk for more than 5 seconds. We let you guys talk for like 15 minutes.
Let's let Josh finish.
More to say than just
it's ridiculous.
Let's let Josh finish his point.
I literally can't finish 30 seconds, but he'll talk for 10 minutes uninterrupted. And this is what happens every single time I come on here.
There, and you're very clearly submissive.
All right, but Brenton, for real, we have to give Josh a chance to make his point.
Yeah.
He is
You're just
maintaining
an
that.
you're just an idiot. I don't know what else to say. You're just stupid. So,
Give me
anyways,
one
we
second.
live.
Okay, hold on. I'm just muting everybody because I know Brenton. I know that he just called you an idiot, Brenton, but we'll come back to you, I promise, because my guess is you wouldn't agree that you're an idiot. But I gotta let Josh finish. Go ahead, Josh. It just clicked. There you go.
Again, so as I was saying, all we're hearing is that there are men or boys who might have some female characteristics or express themselves in feminine ways, but at no point does that make them women. There's no transformative or magical thing that happens that causes them to be women. Now, what they're doing is creating an ex post justification so that they can reverse engineer it and say, oh, no, but they are women because we're now choosing to define woman as this. And it turns and hinges on a gender identity, and anyone can express a specific gender identity that therefore makes them whatever they say their gender identity is. It's still just a man at the end of the day, or a boy, and at no point do they become a woman. And so we have two different definitions of what women is. I would argue your definition is wrong, ours is right, and we're never going to move past that, but we can continue in life with our two different definitions, and I think ours is more accurate, more factual, and more grounded in reality.
Okay, just unmuted you, Brenton.
Okay, so I asked Josh a question here when he started talking about, transubstantiation of sex or gender or whatever. I asked him, how many hairs make a beard? How long does the hair on my face or your face have to grow to where it goes from stubble to a beard? There is no answer for this question. In the same way that there is no answer for like how many grains of sand make a pile. So when you're trying to object to magic that changes someone from a boy to a girl, no one's saying that the person physically changes in any way. What we are saying is that what they identify with and what the rest of society wants to talk to
it's meaninless. Doesn't matter. It's meaninless. Still a man.
Okay, but that's just an empty assertion. You
show me the proof. The burden of proof is on you.
Oh
you provided
God.
Zero proof. You're the one claiming men can become women. Where's the proof?
And by the way,
I'm waiting for it.
Manly. The proof is I provided the definition.
Buddy, you're not manly. Terms. Look at your shirt. Look at your shirt. I thought you were a trans man when you first came on here. I thought you were a biological woman that had transitioned.
This is Calvin and Hobbes.
I thought you were a biological woman that had transitioned. You keep talking about masculinity. You're a fucking nobody. Joe Rogan was just talking about me on his podcast 2 days ago. I have 600 million views. You're a fucking nobody. You're a loser.
We'll just
Nobody knows who you are.
Brenton.
The whole world knows who I am. No one knows who you are. Joe Rogan wasn't talking about you 2 days ago, you dumbass. You're a fucking nobody.
We do need to give Brenton the same chance. All right. We need to give Brenton the same chance to respond. So we'll give Brenton an unmuted 1 minute. Go ahead, Brenton. You'll have to click unmute on your side too, Brenton.
Yeah, that's new. Okay, so my shirt here. Awesome. You gave me a chance to talk about it. This is a Calvin and Hobbes re-inspired variant of Durruti and Machno. They're both two major anarchist military leaders. Durruti spent his time cutting a swath of revolution across 5 countries and 2 continents and saved the city of Barcelona from their own invading fascist military. Similarly, Nestor Machno was one of the greatest military leaders in history. He commanded the Black Army of Ukraine, 100,000 strong peasant army of anarchists that fought the Red and the White Army, and he was the one who defeated them. And I have them both in a tachanka because that's a type of weapon that Machno invented. These men are objectively more manly than anyone here by any stretch of the imagination. But you just saw that I had a shirt with stuff on it and you threw some insults at me. You can do that if you want to, but that won't make you right. That will not make your argument anything other than circular.
Let's kick it over to Taylor. Taylor looks excited to be here. Taylor, go ahead.
So I just dissociated for like the last 2 minutes. But okay. I guess I do feel like we're kind of just talking in circles. I guess my main like qualm with the other side is I feel like I keep asking for a definition of trans woman, and every time they give me one and I challenge it saying that that is not inclusive, or it's not, it doesn't seem to include most or all of the people that would identify as trans. I'm just told that definitions can't be perfect. So I can't work with that, like, in that sense, because, you know, I do feel like that is what we're debating here, is the terms, that one thing is another thing. So
I mean,
if I get a definition, I'm happy to.
okay.
That I don't feel like is.
So again, what's the definition of a beard? That includes all beards and excludes all non-beards.
But do you feel like there's at least like there's a good amount of sufficient? I mean, yeah, I can't. The facial hair. I mean, right?
Let me try to. Okay, so I've had this issue before. I don't know who the hell is telling
Josh,
you
you're muted,
to
sorry.
talk about.
Josh is.
Okay, I don't know who is talking about sufficient conditions, because you guys all say that word, which makes me realize that, like, you're probably all listening to the same bad argument. But I'll give you this. So you want a specific definition for a woman at a specific time and place. So let's go with right here, United
Brenton,
States of America.
They asked for a definition for a trans woman. A trans woman, that's simple. It's a woman who is assigned male at birth but identifies and lives as female. Done. There you go. Yeah. That's it. Gender is this different from their sex.
What does it mean to live as a female and identify as a female?
I've already told you. I kind of agree with you. There's certain levels of stereotypes, but yeah, that's kind of what that is. Sure. Like,
yeah.
What is
and so if a biological female doesn't live up to societal expectations or choose to be feminine, they are no longer a woman by that definition.
By their, what is their gender identity?
I don't know what that means. That's the internal
you're
perception
talking about,
part?
okay, so again, gender, roles, behaviors, identities, and expectations society associates with being male or female. It's a social or psychological construct shaped by cultural and individual identity, which results in a person's deeply held sense of being male or female. All right?
I guess. But again, I feel like that is...
So then when I say that they feel female, that would be they're born male, but they feel female. Okay, trans woman. Okay?
I guess I'm just not convinced that anyone can feel female if they're not female. What? Because I don't...
I mean, yes, to some aspects, in some aspects of gender, yes, they can.
Nobody knows what it is to feel the opposite sex. That I couldn't
knows what it is.
No, but that's where you're conflating. We're not talking about difference in sex.
You said male. You said female. You just said female.
Okay, I get that. I'm talking about gender.
You said the gender is feeling female. That's what you just said.
Yes, because there are sex typical characteristics.
That could be wrong. The sex typical characteristics in a society, wrong. That is the social construct.
Me talking about the trucks and the dolls, that's not me making stuff up. That's
not wrong. You don't feel that,
right? That you're talking about something that's millions and millions of years old. That doesn't just pop up, right? That is an observable characteristic. Right, I understand it's a stereotype, and I understand people can fall against that stereotype. Yes, that's what I'm referring to as gender. Gender can be different from sex.
That's what I'm saying. Your definition isn't inclusive of all trans women, because not all trans women like dolls. Not all trans women identify with the culture as feminine. And then what if the feminine?
Then you're talking about their individual identity, which results in the person's deeply held sense of being male or female. That's perfectly okay. That's also fine.
Okay, so then anyone can just be woman. Is that, you could at least concede that anyone?
Yes, that's what they're saying. Yes, that's what they're arguing.
So, I don't know if absolutely every single person could be woman. I don't know about that.
But Brenton
because their internal sense isn't that.
Okay, sorry.
What if they tell you their internal sense is? What if
they're just like, what, lying?
Maybe. How would you ever know?
What? I feel like they'd slip up. It seems like a pretty grandiose lie.
The only challenge is we have to jump into the Q&A because we have a lot of questions that I do want to get you guys out of here at the same time that we promised. Brenton, I hope you can forgive me. I know you've prepared a speech. I'll give you, how about this? You get 3 minutes. 2 minutes. 2. And then we'll give the other side 2 minutes. And sorry, First Amender, you're in jail. Brenton's the only one that gets to do it because he thought there was going to be a closing because he hasn't been on for a year.
All right, hold on. I'll get my jail back up.
Don't worry. I've got it on my end.
Tell me when.
But
I'd like
Brenton will double jail. Brenton, go ahead. You got 2 minutes, and then we'll kick it over to Taylor and Josh for a minute each, and then we're jumping into the Q&A.
Okay. So what I'm hearing throughout this debate from the other side is in what is called empty assertions. Josh in particular is more he's more guilty than Taylor, but the reason we did nothing but argue about the definition of man or woman during this debate is that they both believe that your gender is determined by your sex, not informed, but determined, as in they are the exact same concept.
Guys, no, we said it's meaningless. We said it doesn't matter. I don't care what someone's gender identity is. It's meaningless. They're still a man.
Jump in here.
They're still a man.
My interruption. Okay, we'll give Brenton a chance to finish. I just asked you to unmute, Brenton.
Okay, you say it's meaningless. Is the United States of America meaningless? Or does that actually have a ton of meaning in it? Well, hang on. The racial makeup of the country's changed. The specific areas changed. When you were talking about the 13 colonies, was that not the nation of America? Of course not. Of course it is. Because that statement has context, even though it is subjective as to what countries are where and who is a citizen of what country. There are still important social consequences of being a citizen of the United States rather than a citizen of Mexico. So again, these are not meaningless terms just because they are subjective to one degree or another. In fact, they're arguably more meaningful than simple direct observations of reality.
Okay, we're going to jump over to Josh and Taylor. You have only 2 minutes, and Taylor will let you go first to the first 60 seconds.
It's going to be quick. I'll just close with saying my opponents have not provided a sufficient definition of trans or woman to prove that the claim trans women are women is true. That's my closing. Thank you.
You got it. Josh, any thoughts?
Yeah, a man doesn't know what it is to live as a woman because a man is not a woman. So the whole construct of gender, which again they described as a construction in the mind, an ideal, is meaningless. And I don't care if a man feels that their gender identity is female. They don't know what it means to be a female, and they are still a man at the end of the day. So we've had zero proof whatsoever that men become women at any point because of the concept of gender identity.
So I'm coming in from, thanks for your questions, folks. Austin Sims asks for all the debaters, but I'd like to hear from Josh and Taylor first. What is the best treatment for gender dysphoria? So if you guys are able to give a short and pithy response, starting with Josh.
Otherwise, we're going to be here for 3.5 hours, guys.
Says the guy who talks 90% of the time.
All right, Josh,
you really are an idiot.
I barely talked.
So you're both idiots. So I think cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy is a efficient way to treat it. You use it for a host of other issues, whether it's bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, OCD. Cognitive behavioral therapy restructures faulty and fallacious thinking, and I think that would be an effective way to treat gender dysphoria. Again, people that are so-called trans are the only ones who have their delusions entertained and then are encouraged to self-mutilate or carry out those delusions. We should treat it like any other mental illness.
Taylor?
I also would, yes, agreed. And also say that we should be putting more research into that while not putting research into whatever the research is showing about creating new terms and things like that. And creating a society that isn't having people confused that because they like dolls, they're a girl. I think that's adding harm to the problem.
Brenton? Pithy.
Quick and pithy. I would say that what we need to do when we're talking about how specific things like gender dysphoria should be treated within society, go to the freaking doctors, go to the psychologists, check out the DSM-5. There's a reason why they took being transgender out as a specific mental problem and instead replaced it with gender
dysphoria.
Thank you, gender dysphoria. The reason they did is because being trans, feeling like you are the sex that society thinks you aren't, doesn't actually hurt you. The only time it hurts you is when small-minded people like Josh try to force them to do things.
It hurts women and it hurts children.
Oh my God.
But you don't want to
care
listen
about
to
women
them.
and
Go with
children, otherwise you
Brenton's
would go
response
against the
here.
Second Amendment or whatever.
It hurts women.
No, that's like
Stop
You don't care
changing the
about women, nor
definition
you
of
care about
woman.
children.
All right, I need you to, we'll go over to First Amender. How would you say that trans people should be? What's the solution?
The medical efficacy, which is basically you go to a psychologist, 4 or 5 sessions, you determine whether or not you have gender dysphoria. If you don't have gender dysphoria, is this for kids or adults?
All of them.
Okay, yeah, I
All
mean, it's
trans
different for
people.
kids or adults. Obviously, like you have to have more checks and balances on the kids one. And then afterwards, if you have gender dysphoria, if you're a kid, then you need to go to the doctor to get hormone blockers, in which case by the time you're 18, you can come to an informed decision as to whether or not you need hormone replacement therapy. Again, complete decision between the patient, the child. Shouldn't be up to a politician, shouldn't be up to some
All
Supreme
right,
Court
we
judge.
must. Wholesome Joe says, Josh, could you please clarify the difference between biological sex versus gender definitionally in scientific terms only, please?
Yeah, so your gender can be, a set of beliefs that people have of what constitutes female, what constitutes male. And if you identify more with what I would say are tropes or stereotypes, that's a female gender identity. We already heard what our opponents said about what that can constitute, playing with dolls or playing with certain people, whether they're boys or girls. So again, I would just argue that it's completely meaningless. It's a social construct. It's completely made up, completely nebulous, and it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And only your sex matters. And we all know what people's sex is, and that doesn't change just because someone articulates. A man says, I have a female gender identity. They don't know what a female gender identity is, so they can't say that.
I literally clearly defined it, but okay.
Is that just
So
for Josh?
disingenuous.
You're saying men or women, you're disingenuous. You're saying anyone can self-ID into womanhood, you're disingenuous.
You're right. I got to agree exactly with what you say. You're
I
right.
hate to do this, but I have to do this. Damien has a two-parter. He says, gender equals sex. And if it doesn't equal sex, well, then gender can equal anything. He also said impossible for a male to know he feels like a woman. I'll give you a chance to respond. Really pithy, Brenton and First Amender.
Sorry, one more time the question.
Oh, you want me to unmute you? I see.
Sorry, one more time the question. I apologize.
They said gender.
Okay.
Brenton will let you go first.
Can I hear that one more time?
Brenton, for crying out loud. They said gender equals sex. If separated, gender equals anything. And they also said impossible for a male to know he feels like a woman.
Okay. So
Pithy.
yeah, all right. So first of all, you're just again saying nuh-uh. It's been Josh's entire argument through this time. Nuh-uh. Gender and sex are exactly the same thing. They are not. And literally no one who studies this believes that they are the same thing. And they haven't believed it for a really long time. Unfortunately, most people are well behind the scientific consensus and medical consensus on specific issues. As far as the accusation that it's meaningless and that sex, somehow that gender could be anything if it didn't mean sex exactly, no, gender then becomes a meaningless word. It is, ironically, it is literally meaningless to equate gender with sex because, again, when you have two different words for the exact same thing, it gives no utility whatsoever. So again, gender is what society says you should be based upon sex. It's also an experience, people identifying with one or the other. You need both components to have a person of a particular gender.
Yeah.
This one from Damien says, transgenderism doesn't exist. An alleged trans person, if abandoned as a child and raised in the world, couldn't or wouldn't experience transgenderism at all.
That's not true, objectively.
Where did you get that?
Yeah,
First,
oh, I'm sorry.
I'll give you a really quick, pithy response, but it has to be like 2 sentences, Brenton.
Okay, there was a guy in I believe the 80s. His name was David. There was a botched circumcision where his genitals were mostly destroyed. As a result of this, they told him he was a girl, dressed him in girls' clothes, put him out into the world. He'd never known anything differently. But no, I'm a boy. I'm a boy. I'm a boy. He suffered his entire life because of people like Josh, and eventually took his own life at like age 33.
This one from Sunflower says, First Amender, asymptotic doesn't repurpose a word that already exists and that everyone already has an understanding of. Your analogy fails miserably.
Words have multiple definitions. Try again. Like what?
This one, Sunflower says, First Amender follow-up. The entire debate is about the repurposing and broadening of the word woman to include males. Asymptotic is not analogous.
Yeah, I just explained it. It's words have multiple definitions. Like, what is this?
This one from jakecoin.com says masculinum mimica or femina mimica are the proper terms we need to adopt. I coined these Latin terms. Enjoy them. Do you enjoy these, Brenton?
No.
No.
This one from.
I like the.
I'm just going to go with whatever the scientific consensus is. Like, simple.
Yeah.
Do you know,
Goonies.
at one point, scientific consensus was for lobotomies. Do you realize that? That's not.
That's correct. And
that's
then we
not
learned
right.
more, and then we went to that.
Right, but maybe critical thinking should be involved. Okay.
Well, you're not a scientist. You're not equipped to be able to handle those things. Yeah, that's why I go with the scientific consensus.
This is Origuni saying, why do trans individuals take hormones?
Because people treat them like shit if they don't.
Why do individuals take hormones? So that way they can be closer to their gender identity?
This one from Damien says, transgenderism doesn't exist. An alleged trans person is merely a male or female who has specific likes and dislikes. This is no different than anyone else.
By sex, but not by gender. Why is it so hard to figure this out?
I don't understand.
Damien says, force females to accept penises in locker rooms, yes or no? Okay, so if I go work out at Planet Fitness, which I do, and I go into the locker room, or let's say a girl goes into the locker room, and then she sees Brenton in the ladies' locker room and his balls are hanging out. Do you think this should be okay or not?
You go to a Planet Fitness and you see all the men's balls hanging out?
No. I said there if a woman went. I changed it.
So first of all, if I'm just walking around nude with my balls hanging out, it doesn't really matter where I am. That's kind of rude,
But can a trans person do it is what they're saying.
I mean, I have friends that are trans who've gone fully through HRT. If they use the bathroom that people of their original assigned at birth gender, people would freak out. They would think that it was me in there. The level of alteration in the body that happens when you are blocking testosterone and adding estrogen or vice versa is
gigantic.
massive. Yeah. So even if okay, we've got a trans woman using the woman's room. If she's gone through HRT, they're not going to be able to tell the difference.
What if she hasn't gone through that?
I don't really give a crap where
you don't give a crap, but do women have a right to care?
I mean, everybody has a right to care about things, but
I mean,
there's no epidemic of women being assaulted by trans women in locker rooms.
They also also just FYI, anybody sexually assaulting anyone, man or woman, just go to jail. It's okay.
So why
just
even
take
have
them to
gendered
jail.
spaces then? So why even have gendered spaces if just any doesn't matter then?
Whoa, based and progressive pilled? Holy crap.
Yeah. There was I was at DragonCon, biggest fantasy sci-fi convention in the world. They had bi-gender or whatever. Men and women could use whatever bathroom they wanted to use at any time, and it was fine. There were no assaults, and that's freaking crazy if you think about it.
Do you understand the concept of a survivor's bias or something like that? Just because something bad hasn't happened to you or directly to someone you know doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Okay, but statistically speaking, trans people aren't assaulting women. I'm sorry, it's just not
It is
real.
happening. I mean, it is.
It's not the reality.
I think that the bathroom issue is annoying.
It's already an incredibly rare situation.
Who?
I mean, there are cases.
To be fair, right? Like a majority of trans people, like they literally will just physically avoid these spaces just like this, just so that way they don't have to deal with like transphobes. Like, I don't know, like I can't even imagine what like a trans man would have to deal with, like seeing Josh at the in the men's like lobby. They would just like leave. Like that's 99 out of 100 times.
I just want to be sure that we're clear. Okay, so like if there was a trans woman who looked like Brenton, so they had not transitioned, and they had, they went in the locker room and they had balls.
Use it, fam.
Would it be okay?
Big old balls. Cool with that?
I really don't care where someone uses the bathroom. I care whether...
Maybe women do. Maybe women don't want men in their bathrooms.
Actually, most women don't actually care.
Redux has done a number of studies showing the assaults that occur in female prisons when men are put in the cells with women.
Prison! Holy shit, dude!
This is just right-wing alarmism.
On most women don't care. Where's your...
Let's do it yes or no. Okay, so
yeah,
like
I don't care what most
trans woman with balls walking around naked in a woman's locker room. Like, is this yes or no, Brent?
Just walking around naked, and well, in that instance with our culture,
like, you fine with it?
That might be an indication of a possible problem. Not because the person is trans, but because the person is violating social convention in a major way. So I can see why somebody might be...
If they're like sexually assaulting people.
Yeah.
That would be the only...
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. If they're not sexually assaulting anybody, sure.
Ask Taylor what she thinks, since she's a real woman, an actual woman, instead of asking the men here what they think about other men in women's restrooms.
We got the gay voice going on.
Cool.
The gay voice.
Let's do
Bro,
the
you look
anecdote.
like you're a trans man. You literally look like a biological female. What are you talking about?
I was a trans man.
We agreed beforehand.
I became a multi-millionaire off of my social media because of my body. You're a fucking nobody. You're a nobody. Nobody knows who the fuck you are.
Okay. So let me just jump to the next question. Sunflower says, there is no genetic binary underpinning beards. There is a genetic binary underpinning gender. The majority of trans people aren't intersex. Checkmate.
There is a genetic binary underpinning gender for, I mean, yeah, but sometimes it doesn't always. Like, you understand, like, when things can be bimodal, right? And it's like sometimes you don't fit in the... Anyway.
It's not one or the other. Like, take binary. Like, we know that gender is not binary because of the existence of intersex people. And so, like, in a computer, when they're coding, code is binary. It is all zeros and ones. There is never a 2. There's never a 1.5. They literally don't exist, which comes back to the argument that I made right at the beginning, was that if gender were objective and were determined by the biological sex, it would be as silly as saying that a human has 2 heads instead of 1. We couldn't even have this discussion. The fact that we are having this discussion is proof that the concept of gender is different from biological sex.
Cool. It doesn't make men women.
Oh my God.
Doesn't make men women, you fucking idiot. You are
this
fucking
guy does
stupid.
it just for clout. It's just clout.
You're a fucking idiot. That's why I have 600 million views.
Hold on.
Okay. No one will ever know who you are.
I don't care.
No one will ever know who you are. Nobody. Everybody cares. 600 million people.
Okay. I hate to do this. Okay, Josh, you called Brenton. Brenton?
Yeah. What did you want me to say something?
This is your chance to call him an effing idiot.
Okay, thank you. I will actually do that. Okay, Josh, you think that having a bunch of money and a bunch of people watching you makes you better than people that don't have that? That is ridiculous. Not only is it ridiculous, like, it is completely
We'll go to the next question.
There's nothing going on in that mind of yours, and it's really...
Let's go to the next question. All right.
In terms of what other people think.
600 million views. Nobody knows who you are.
Okay.
Nobody knows who you are. Never will.
More views than
Nobody
that.
will ever
We
know.
have to go to the next question. I hate to do this. Fire 32 says, Brenton and First Amender. In general, when a woman gets, has a man penetrate her, they get pregnant. That being the case, How come when a trans woman gets penetrated, they do not get pregnant?
When a trans woman gets penetrated, they do not get pregnant because they don't have a womb, because they are not biologically a woman by sex. Correct.
I should also
like the
add
sex
that,
never changes, but the gender changes. Like, why is this so hard? Like, I swear, I feel like I'm like drawing it like in crayon for you guys, and it's like still impossible to kind of wrap your head around it. It's bonkers to me.
I'd just like to point out that you don't get pregnant just for being penetrated. You know, just that is
That
so
too,
you're
that
wrong.
too.
Like,
Good point.
don't understand how sex works, which is pretty goddamn funny.
I'm assuming they thrusted multiple times and then they like.
This is weird. This is why you're behind bars. We got to go to the next one. They are. Says, Happy New Year, first molester. Did you miss me? That's why he's behind bars too. They say he's not a molester that we know of. Happy New Year to James and everyone else as well. Thank you. You host the best of HL on the internet. I appreciate that. And Sunflower says,
You're clipping, by the way.
phenotype is to genotype as sex is to gender. One causes the other, but they are not the exact same thing.
So one is part of the cause of the other. I came up with it. So think of a hand. The hand right here think of that as sex, as biological sex. The fingers that come off my hand are gender expression. The thing that affects gender that does not affect sex is the social roles expected of people who are identified to be male or female, or hell, a third thing, or 5,000 different things. It's literally specific to a given culture at a given time and place. You need to identify as a woman and be acknowledged by your community as a woman to be a woman. In the same way that you need to identify as a doctor and be acknowledged by the AMA and have a medical degree to be a doctor.
Wait,
if you don't have that shit, you're not a doctor.
What does it mean to be identified by your community as a woman? What does that mean?
What I'm sorry.
You said they have to be recognized by their community as a woman in order to be a woman.
Yeah.
What if they don't recognize them as a woman? Are they not a woman?
They're a woman to themselves. They are stuck in like a twilight.
Meaningless. It's all utterly meaningless. They're still men that have a gender identity crisis. It's meaningless.
Whoa, wait. Is gender different from sex? Stop. No way.
They're men.
Did he fight? He accidentally slipped it,
They
guys.
are men. It doesn't matter if you call it gender identity or whatever you want to call it. Gender expression. It makes no difference. They're still a man. They're still a man.
Clipped.
Doesn't matter what you call the social construct. They're still a man.
We have a couple of questions that are relevant here. So this one comes in from Origuni. Says, if gender is just a mind state and it's not, doesn't mean your physical stuff, then why take the hormones?
It's not just a mind state. People take the hormones. I suspect people take the hormones primarily because if they don't look and appear and act like the gender that they feel on the inside, people like Josh will treat them like shit. Because again, he's stupid and he is ignorant.
They're men, you fucking retard.
Oh no!
You're a fucking idiot.
Dude.
That's why you're fat as fuck and nobody knows who you are. You're fat, poor, and stupid as fuck.
Brenton,
no one will ever know who you are.
Body. We're gonna jump to the next question. Damien says they said if genders, we got this one. They said Damien says they were too scared to answer my simple yes/no question. They're referring to about, if if his balls were hanging out in the woman's locker room.
I answered directly. It was I'm perfectly okay with it. It's fine.
I mean, flashing in public indecency is a problem. So
it's a problem you have when men are
if it's in a locker room. It's a locker room.
But it's in a locker room, so it's not.
As long as they're not sexually assaulting anybody, go for it. Go for it, fam. Who cares?
You're a man. Why are you speaking on behalf of women? Shut the fuck up.
Most women also don't care. Like, I don't know what this argument is. Like, you want me to pull up Pew Research? It shows that. So
a lot of women care, you fucking idiot.
Right,
you're an imbecile.
Okay, but the majority don't.
A lot of women.
That's why nobody knows who you are.
We must go to the next question.
With more views than you, and
I'm more popular. Therefore, I'm right.
Oh my!
I am.
What a cringe!
Do you understand?
So cringe.
values.
Arguing that men are
Don't
women
worry, I'll
place
get there.
fucking
I'll get there one day.
stupid. That's why nobody knows who you are.
I don't care. My God, man. Like,
That's why you're fat as fuck and you're
Hold on.
ugly
Okay.
and you look poor and dirty.
Yes.
oh
Last-
man,
Last question. Les says, if an adult male identifies as a little girl and wants to play with and have sleepovers with little girls, should that identity feeling be condoned?
Age is not socially constructed. So, no.
I would agree. I think it's weird, like when an adult wants to play with young children unsupervised when they're not.
I think it's weird
around
when
that
men
time.
go into women's restrooms.
Oh my God, they don't actually.
We are going to wrap up. We hope you folks have a great rest of your night. I am going to do a post-credit scene letting you know about upcoming debates as well as DebateCon 5, which is our conference where in chat. Can you tell me? When you put in chat, Newark, New Jersey, just so everybody knows, it's going to be in Newark, New Jersey, February 14th, 15th, and 16th. With that, I want to say huge thank you to our guests. Brenton, you look like you're dying to say something. Did you want to insult Josh back before we go?
Well, actually, I didn't, because that's dumb.
Take some diet pills. You're fat as fuck.
All right.
And you,
Oh my
Let's
God.
go. We must go. Okay. Let's see.
you can identify as
Okay,
skinny.
I
It's
hate to do this. So you gotta just okay. What do you final thoughts? Like in the last scene from Jerry Springer when he had his final thought. Anything? Does anybody want to say? I really care about Okay, no. Brent, what have you got, Brent? Okay, I do want to I gotta let you guys go though. So really, just super pissed.
What disturbs me about this debate is not that the opposition has been unable to understand and talk about what we are talking about in our terms and in our words. They only insist that, like, not even hypothetically, that the only way we can think about this is one way, and that that gender is determined by sex. This is ridiculous within the level of research.
I'm not like a final. I didn't mean like a final closing statement.
What do you want me to? Oh, go subscribe.
I meant I really care about everybody, even though we disagree. But I do want to say,
you want me to be nice. Yeah, okay. To tell you the truth, I've thrown some shade. I felt like I did that because Josh kind of deserved it for his opening statement. But ultimately,
okay.
I think I don't actually bear Josh any ill will. And to tell you the truth, Taylor, I have actually had a reasonably interesting conversation with you. So, even though I think
we have to go. Okay, it's like Taylor says thank you. Okay, so let it go. Want to say, folks, check out our guest links in the description box. With that, I'll be back in just a moment. So stick around, and thank you to our debaters for being here tonight.